Good day. I'm Red Sergeant S. Peanut. I'm part of Group 5, and this is the PowerPoint presentation regarding policy making process. Let's begin. One of the topic outlines that we have right now, or well, multiple topic outlines, are what is policy making process, what are the steps in making policy, what is the final step in making policy. What is policymaking process? A policy established and carried out by the government goes through several stages from inception to conclusion. Officials developed it within the institutions of government to address public issues through the political process. It is also intended to improve the quality of life for its citizens. Policymaking involves a combination of processes. Although not always clear cut or easily distinguished, political scientists have identified these processes for purposes of analysis. They include the following, which are the five steps in policymaking. Number one is identifying policy problems, formulating policy proposals, legalizing public policy, implementing public policy, and finally evaluating public policy. One is identifying policy problems. These are the five components of what defines identifying policy problems, which is the first one is agenda setting. Agenda setting, that is, deciding what is to be decided, is the first critical step in the policy making process. To get on the agenda problems must come to policymakers' attention. Some problems, even major problems, are too invisible to make an agenda, while others, such as healthcare, are already highly visible. So, in a way, it depends on the priority of the issue that warrants a policy. You see. Next is political ideology. Political ideology is a driving force in agenda setting. This defines a conservative as a defender of the status quo. The more rigid conservative generally opposes virtually all government regulations of the economy. It also favors local and state action over federal action and emphasizes fiscal responsibility, most notably in form of balanced budgets. Of course, not all conservatives are this rigid, but as it states, a defender of the status quo, they will do whatever they can in order to, uphold their political ideology. Next is special interest. These groups are a staple of the political landscape, and they do their best to influence the political agenda, either directly or indirectly. Special interest groups may represent people based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, income, and other factors. This states, well, as it states, special interest, whether where a specific policymaking goes, if the problem is heavily towards a specific race, gender, or sexual orientation, a policy may be made to better help those uh, rep- specific aspect of the people. Mass media. The mass media deciding what is news and who is newsworthy is a powerful political weapon. Some finds that the media exert substantial influence in deciding what problems will be given attention and what problems will be ignored. It creates issues and personalities. Media inattention can doom issues and personalities to obscurity. So in a way, if these mass media are unable to cater to a specific problem or even bring a light to this problem to the people, this said problem might fester and might grow into something worse if the people aren't given awareness to such problems. Public opinion. Public opinion may not determine public policy, but politicians are mindful of what their constituents particularly their powerful constituents, think. So in a way, public opinion is heavily, what's the word? Heavily sided to the constituents and constituents, whether what they think and what they should think. Basically, as it states, either it's public opinion or depending on what is highly favored by the people. I mean, by the public. Oh, sorry. All right, okay. So, formulating policy proposals. Policy proposals can be formulated through political channels, by policy planning organizations, interest groups, government bureaucracies, and state legislatures, and the president and Congress. So there's a lot of people that can make a policy and the policy proposal. I mean, the policy proposal, I mean. So there's a lot of ups and downs of where the policy may go and whether it's accepted or not. So, but some policy issues do catch fire in a way that it's like why this basically why this specific policy these certainly have policy preferences, but in most areas of governments, policy is highly complex and generally requires the efforts of those whose careers are devoted to particularly policy subsystems. So in a way, it's dependent on the people that have the substantial amount of either skill and wisdom regarding how this particular policy is going to benefit for the public. Last, I mean, no, not lastly, but thirdly, legitimizing public policy. Policy is legitimized as a result of public statements or actions of government officials, both elected and appointed in all branches and all levels. This includes executive orders, budgets, laws, appropriations, rules, regulation, and decisions and interpretations that have the effect of setting policy directions. Give me a moment. Okay. So, legitimizing public policy. So, in a way, this includes executive orders, budgets, laws, appropriation, rules, and regulation that are interpretation of the policy direction. So, in a way, it goes through a process of which is this really is this really important in a way? Should we put this in a if this was put out into the public, how would this benefit? Well, of course, the public. How appropriate this are in the government's implementation. So this is what legitimizing public policy is. Next, we have implement public policy. Policy is implemented through the activities of public bureaucracies and expenditure of public funds. So in a way, policy implementation includes all all the activities that result from the official adoption of a policy. Policy implementation is what happens after a law is passed. So in a way, we should never assume that the passage of a law is the end of the policy making process. Sometimes laws are passed and nothing happens. Sometimes laws are passed and executive agencies, presuming to act under these laws, do a great deal more than Congress ever intended. So, in a way, what's the point of implementing a public policy if it was never reinforced to begin with? Lastly, we have evaluating public policy. Policies are formally and informally evaluated by government agencies, by outside consultants, by interest groups, by the mass media, and by the public. Governments, especially the federal government, have spent millions of dollars to determine whether the policies and programs they have initiated are having effects. So after the law, I mean not law, the public policy has been passed and it's been implemented. Now this is where the evaluating phase start. So when evaluating, it is evident that the program evaluations can produce their own political fallout. There may be disagreements about study methodology, and people with different views will interpret the same study result differently. So again, this is really important to whether if the policy has taken effect, of whether it's positive or negative in the public. Next, or these are the final steps in policymaking process. Among the five steps in the policymaking process, evaluating public policy is the most important in policymaking. Evaluating public policy, the final stage of policymaking process, involves an ongoing evaluation. So no matter how much time it passes, it's always a good idea to evaluate a certain policy, a public policy, to see if it's still either still taking effect, or it's has been either been a problem, it even festered the problem even more, or even helped them. So it's always good to evaluate the public policy. So it determines of how well a policy will work, is working, and basically not an easy. It's not an easy task. People inside and outside of government typically use cost-benefit analysis to try to find the answer. So in a way, there's still an act of spending in a way that these policies, whether it worked or not. That's why the final step in policymaking process is always the evaluating of the public policy. And I guess that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. And these are the references that we've made in making the policy. I mean the PowerPoint presentation. And that has been the PowerPoint presentation of Group 5 regarding the policy making process. Thank you and have a good day.